Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. And this episode's big game takes place right here in Japan's capital. At least part of it does. Today's special guest is the creator of the Daily Status of Bayonetta 3 on Twitter, and we're talking about what else? Bayonetta 3. We chat about the iconic Twitter account, how Bayonetta 3 separates itself from the rest, and the future of the franchise. Also in the game section, I chat about the chill city pop-inspired Bonito Days and the collectible card game Marvel Snap. This episode's feature is on Surugaya, a popular used goods chain in Japan. It's among my favorite places to shop for retro games and merch, so listen up if you want to know some of the best places in Tokyo to nab some old games. And as always, I'll run down the latest news. Let's jump right into the games and talk about Bayonetta 3 with the creator of the Daily Status of Bayonetta 3. The newest Nintendo-published title is none other than Bayonetta 3. Developed by Platinum Games, it's the latest entry in the critically acclaimed character action series. Joining me today to chat about the game is a special guest who has literally been counting down the days until release. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm the Daily Status of Bayonetta 3, or also known as Daily Bayonetta. And I'm here to talk about the same thing I talk about every day, Bayonetta 3.
Thanks for joining me today. Let's start at square one. What's your history with the Bayonetta series?
Everything started when I got my Switch in Christmas of 2017. I finished 100% of Mario Odyssey and I wanted to play something more, but I had no idea what. I played this game called Fire Emblem Warriors and I loved it. And then I saw that on February, I saw that the two Bayonetta games were going to be ported to the Switch. And I knew Bayonetta because of Smash, but I never played her games. But they always piqued my interest. And after I read that it was an action game, quite similar but not the same as Fire Emblem Warriors, I was like, I'll give it a try. I wasn't very hopeful of it, but I first played Bayonetta 2, and I played it and I loved it. I loved every single moment. The prologue, the prologue is the best prologue in all video in history, in my opinion. And I loved the beginning, the middle, the end, and I said, oh wow, I need to play the first one right now. So I bought another copy that had the code. And then I played Bayonetta 1 and fell in love with it as well. And I was like, wow, I want to play the next game because Bayonetta 3 already had its trailer come out, but I had to wait a little bit more for that.
How do you say Bayonetta separates itself from most other action games?
Like most other action games, it's very flashy. The whole point is getting better ranks while getting more flashier. Okay? But I do think that every single character action game does it very different. For example, in Bayonetta, I think it feels like dancing, like you're playing some sort of weird rhythm game, and that you only know how the dance will go next. That's how I feel it.
Yeah, that seems to be a common sentiment for a lot of the fans of the series. Bayonetta 3 was announced back in 2017. What was your reaction to Bayonetta 3's announcement?
Well, I didn't play Bayonetta back then, like I said, but I remember thinking, oh wow, now that the two games are out and I played them, I said, I can't wait for Bayonetta 3 so I can get the full Bayonetta experience. And then, like everyone knows, there were no news for a very, very long time. And then one day before the September Nintendo Direct from last year, there was a leak that said that Bayonetta 3 was going to be in the Direct. And I didn't have much hope in it because I thought they would honestly just have Camilla say that Bayonetta 3 development was fine and say that the game was coming in 2022 and not show anything, right? But then the trailer started and it was very confusing because it didn't feel like what a Bayonetta cutscene feels like. But then you see the purple bullets, you hear that iconic witch time sound effect, you see that giant fist, and then you see that finally the witch is back. And I just lost it. I fell in love with that trailer. I rewatched it so many times the days after, and the tweet where I finally said that there was news got like 100K likes, and it was beautiful seeing so many people happy, just like me, for this game that we've been waiting for so long.
Yeah, that trailer was kind of a tease because it showed Lappy from Astral Chain.
Yeah, I did think it was Astral Chain 2. Yeah. And I was like, oh wow, Astral Chain 2 before even Bayonetta 3. Like, two whole Astral Chain games before even Bayonetta 3.
You run the, dare I say, iconic The Daily Status of Bayonetta 3 Twitter account, where you relayed whether or not there was news on the game. What inspired you to run the Daily Status of Bayonetta 3 account?
Okay, so back when, after I played 2 games, and then a few years later, there was this meme that I saw uh, that it was Bayonetta and John as news anchors saying that there is no news. And I remember thinking, wouldn't it be so funny if like there was an account that just treated that picture with a day count and nothing else? And I did. But at first I was scared that they would give us news and the whole joke would have been ruined. But fortunately, or more like unfortunately, the joke lasted for a while, a very long while, maybe more than I would have wanted to.
Were you surprised at the huge reaction the account got? Why do you think it became so popular?
When I started, I thought it was going to be like this little thing that would get like likes and retweets every now and then. But then every single Nintendo Direct that passed with no Bayonetta news, uh, everyone just came into my account and like started posting their memes and saying how sad they were, uh, sharing all of this sadness and disappointment in my little tweets. And I was kind of surprised for that because every time there was a Nintendo Direct and then there was nothing, my numbers would just go up and up. And I was like, wow, people really are into just knowing that their game, their beloved game, will never come out. So I was a bit surprised, but honestly, I think it was worth it in the end that so many people came together because when there was news, like it was just beautiful. Like I said, it was very. When I said it, I was amused to see so many people that share the same feeling about the game after so long. It was so beautiful.
Did you think it would take 1,786 days for the game to be released?
Well, I didn't even think it would take 1,000 days. Every year, I went, this is the year of Bayonetta 3. And when nothing happened, I said, well, next year for sure will be the year of Bayonetta 3. And then it didn't. So there was a point where I thought I'll be posting for even longer, like for years. I'll post every single day.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was scared. Part of me was very like scared that Bayonetta 3 was in development hell or something like that, and will take like 10 years, like Duke Nukem, like took forever. But at the end, the trailer came out and ended with that 2022 tease, and that was the last time I said next year will be the year of Bayonetta 3, and so it was.
Well, let's get into talking about the actual game. As a Bayonetta veteran, what surprised you most about Bayonetta 3?
I was surprised on how like accessible it was, because the first Bayonetta game was very rough on you. Like you had these quick time events that come out of nowhere with no indication, and if you fail them, you die instantly. If you eat lollipops, your rank will go down. Like you will never have a pure platinum trophy at the end of a chapter if you eat them and stuff like that. But Bayonetta 2 was better. It had no more quick time events, and you could eat as many lollipops as you wanted to, and it wouldn't affect your score. So that was very good for people like me who suck at Bayonetta. Yeah, I could eat all lollipops all day. Yeah, but Bayonetta 3 is another level. Not only it kept the improvements from 2, but also there was new stuff. Like you could go to a certain point in a chapter, and you don't need to get a perfect pure platinum run. You could like fail and then come back at any moment and redo the verse, and that's it. And I was very surprised by that, especially because I thought the people at Platinum wanted to make pure Platinum trophies a really tough challenge, but now I see that making them like this was something I never knew I wanted. And also that you can see all of the tutorials at any point by just entering the menu. It surprised me that the game as strict as Bayonetta 1 and the game as carefree as Bayonetta 3 are in the same franchise.
A major new gameplay mechanic is Demon Slave, which lets you control giant monsters like kaiju. It's conceptually similar to the Umbran climax from the past games. How does this change up the gameplay in Bayonetta 3?
Both are, you could say that they are similar in description, that is just summoning big demons in normal gameplay and not only as a boss finisher. But they are quite different because Umbran Climax feels more like a stat boost. Like you do the same combo, same stuff, but it does more damage. But Demon Slave is like a whole different section of gameplay. Every single demon has their own like mechanics. Like you
Hmm.
wouldn't play Madama Butterfly as you do Gomorrah, for example. They are very different. It feels kind of weird at first. I won't lie. I was very confused and I was scared this wasn't for me. But the more I played with it and the more demons I got, it really became something like part of my strategy on how to beat certain tough enemies and stuff like that. So while they are not the same, they do fulfill certain similar roles of trying to power you up when you need it.
There's also Demon Masquerade, which is similar to Wicked Weave in the past games, which lets you fuse with a weapon. What are your thoughts on this new mechanic?
At first, I was very like unamused by it. I thought
Hmm.
that I was like, oh, this is Demon Masquerade. That's it. Because Madama Butterfly is the first one you get. Is kind of like normal Bayonetta with a few more stuff like you can fly and stuff like that. But I was like a bit disappointed by it. But the more demons I got, the more weapons I got, it felt so like different. Like every single masquerade felt like it fulfilled different purposes. For example, there was this one. The way it worked, it was very great for like getting certain like collectibles that were hard to reach and
Hmm.
you could easily die, but with it it was much different and it really makes the whole movement of the game feel different depending on your weapon, which I guess is a step up from both the games because normally you would get like big weapon, you feel a bit slow, but you can always go to Beast Within and just run around like you wanted. Uh, but now you could very easily have different types of movement that really can help you in certain occasions where you are in a tough spot.
In terms of gameplay, does it feel very iterative of Bayonetta 2, or do you think it's like a big step up in terms of new features and mechanics?
Bayonetta 2 is great. I love it. But its greatest flaw is that it doesn't try to change much from its predecessor.
Hmm.
I think that the people at Platinum were scared to do so because Bayonetta 1 is phenomenal. So instead of taking the series to the next level, they just polished the combat and that's it. But going in to Bayonetta 3, I was surprised on how much the gameplay changed.
Hmm.
How there were so many new things. It wasn't just a polished version of Bayonetta 2. You had so many different stuff, like you said Demon Masquerade and the Demon Slayer, sorry.
Hmm.
And there are other stuff that you get by trying to playing more and more. You get more even more stuff. And not only that, because there are some chapters where you play like jump stealth games, and or they are very. At first, they can be a bit like you feel like a shock because they are very different from normal Bayonetta levels. But you get accustomed to it, and you eventually find them a bit like gearing, like something you will miss a
Hmm.
bit when you go to the last chapters.
A new playable character in the game is Viola. What are her gameplay segments like, and do you think she fits in well with Bayonetta and Jean?
I love Viola as a character, but not so much as a gameplay change. Found it kind of hard to get her witch time because it's with another button. So I was sometimes like pressing the wrong button and I got killed very easily. I think it's something more like Bayonetta and John are like easy to get into and hard to master, while Viola maybe is the opposite because even now that I finished the game and all, I still can't play as Viola, and I will have to play her chapters a bit more till I get used to it.
Hmm.
She really is like in every Bayonetta game. There's like a third character you get. In Bayonetta 1, it was Lil King Zero. That was like a secret character, very similar to Bayonetta. The only thing was that he had one life point. In Bayonetta 2, you had Rosa, who did feel like Bayonetta, but she had her own stuff, like her climax was different from Bayonetta and Jones, and she was, of course, stronger. And Viola seems to be the the one that is the most different from Bayonetta and John. But I don't know, I can't get used to it. I'll try to play her chapters more and see how it goes.
Let's talk about the story a bit. There's a multiversal element which seems to be a popular trend these days. Was this concept a major part of past Bayonetta games? Did you expect them to touch on it in Bayonetta 3?
Well, the multiverse is like something new for the Bayonetta series in a sense, because you could consider it that there is a bit of multiversal elements in Bayonetta 1 in the ending
Hmm.
of the split timelines of the Brave Cereza timeline and the timeline you've been playing with, but nothing much. But this concept really gets a lot of attention in Bayonetta 3, more than I thought, honestly, because every single level, well, most levels are in different multiverses with their own rules, their own Bayonettas, and their whole stories. So I was surprised that they took the story to this direction and not like another of the other two games of one of the trinities went insane, we have to stop them. It was a fresh new change. I can tell that Platinum Games wanted to focus more on the story than in the previous two games, and I honestly love the story. I think many people complain. I get their complaints, but I love it the way it's different from the two other games.
I noticed in this game, Bayonetta also goes to Tokyo. Has she ever been to Tokyo before in the other games?
No, she mainly stayed in her whole like fictional Bayonetta place we need for the story, like Vigorate and Thimble Venter. There were some sections in New York in Bayonetta 2, the first one, and there were also New York segments in Bayonetta 2 with the
Hmm.
beginning and the end. Um, but now that we're going to like a trip around the world, you could say,
Hmm.
it feels like every single world you go to, will be Tokyo, Egypt, or France, it feels unique in some way, but it still feels like you are in a Bayonetta place.
Do you feel this game is a good jumping in point for newcomers, or should they start with the earlier Bayonetta games?
Gameplay wise, I believe it is, because like I said, it's very accessible and you can start the gameplay there with a game that is more carefree and that wants to help you more. But story wise, I think that you'll be a little bit confused at certain points, especially at the end, because
Hmm.
this game is really a love letter to the whole series in general.
Hmm.
And you won't really get some stuff that you see, but you'll still have a very good time.
If there is a Bayonetta 4, where would you like them to take the series?
Bayonetta 3 opened a lot of possible ways it could go. Of course, they could still continue with the multiverse, not like a multiversal level threat, but more like going to different universes, because
Hmm.
it's a nice way of changing things up while still making them familiar, and they don't have to stick to the same story, so they can create new stuff that they want to try out. But I also believe that going for like a soft reboot of the series would be great. Um, like a new type of way to see Bayonetta, because Bayonetta, I think like it's remembered for its flashiness. It's the way Bayonetta moves, how she shows off her outfits and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But I think that if they can still keep that, like I said, that type of combat that it's like dancing and like expand it to different horizons. Because just like dancing, you can dance in many other ways, many different styles.
Well, I'm glad you could join me to chat about the game. So, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter on at Daily Bayonetta. I don't post as often. I'll only post so my account doesn't get like suspended for inactivity or something like that.
Hmm.
But if there's DLC or Bayonetta 4 gets announced, I'll stay there and update every single day about the daily status of Bayonetta 4. Gotta change the name here.
Awesome. And listeners, you can find the link in the podcast description. So, Daily Bayonetta, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. I always wanted to be like an interview podcast thingy, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Like most people, or at least people with no self-control, I have quite the backlog. Indie games, retro game collections. I even have at least one Nintendo published game downloaded on my Switch, but I haven't touched it yet. That's pretty much the cardinal sin, but I will play it. One day. Soonish? We'll see. But with November having a ton of games, and in December we get a lot of tempting Christmas sales, so I thought I might as well try to knock out some of my backlog games now. And one of them is Bonito Days from UK developer Studio Somewhere. They recently put out a new game called Spin Frog just a few days ago that looks kind of like Kuru Kuru Kururin. And similarly, Bonito Days is very reminiscent of another game, or at least a game within a game. To put it simply, Bonito Days feels like an expanded version of Monkey Target from Super Monkey Ball. For the unfortunate who have not played Monkey Target, it's a minigame within Super Monkey Ball where you fly off a ramp and then glide to a target. Along the way, you collect points, power-ups, multipliers, and so on until you land on a giant dartboard. The concept is very simple, but the appeal comes from the different elements at play. It's not just aiming a monkey at a board. You have to think about when and where you need to start gliding, the wind, and where on the board you want to strike, what boards are on the field, and also carefully control your character. The controls for the monkey are incredibly specific. If you just start fiddling your stick, you're going to lose your momentum, altitude, and then crash into the water for 0 points. Monkey Target is actually quite difficult for just a mini-game, but that's part of the appeal. It takes time to master. It has far more depth than any random Mario Party minigame. And oh yeah, it's a multiplayer minigame. One at a time, but watching your friends get scarily close to your high score or completely whiff and just hurl themselves into the ocean is a ton of fun. Bonito Days takes this concept and expands upon it, but also changes it up quite a bit so it's not a one-to-one clone. For one, you're some sort of squidfish and not a monkey. The mechanics are largely the same. You ramp off something, open up your ball, and then glide to the target trying to get the most points. The difference is that for one, it's far easier to control. You don't need to worry about suddenly falling into the ocean because you pushed the stick too far, and there's no wind to worry about. It's much easier to fly around, and it's pretty hard to fail unless you crash into something or mistime your landing. But is this a good thing? A big part of the appeal of Monkey Target is its difficulty and precise yet peculiar controls. When you get a great score, it feels like an accomplishment. But Bonito Days decided to focus on delivering a more relaxed, atmospheric experience over one where you are trying to min-max your score. Some may prefer this, others might prefer the challenging elements of Monkey Target. I can at least appreciate that Bonito Days is going for something a bit different. The game is also very different with its overall aesthetic and atmosphere. It has a very bright pop look filled with neon colors and simple polygon graphics. Skies are pink, mountains are purple, that type of thing. I'm not quite sure what's one clean word to describe this look. Pastel punk? I don't know, just put punk at the end of a word and you've got a new genre. Kawaii-core? If I said it on a podcast, I think I automatically get the trademark. You either connect with this type of aesthetic or you don't, but either way, it's definitely distinct and attracts people who like this type of look. The game is really the whole package in terms of luring me into buying it. Monkey Target, colorful graphics, random Japanese words in the level names like Konnichiwa Falls, a jazzy city pop inspired soundtrack with lyrics in Japanese. I mean, how could I ignore this? You honestly had me at Monkey Target and the rest is just a bonus. The single player game is broken up into cups where you fly through 5 levels and rack up points. The stages in Bonito Days are more elaborate than the empty obstacle-less ones in Super Monkey Ball. Yeah, a lot take place over the ocean, but there are also levels set in towns, mountainous regions, icy domains, and so on. The stages emphasize trying different routes and accessing new areas instead of just making a beeline for the target. The town levels are striking in that you don't immediately start rolling down a big ramp, but instead you're rolling around the streets and have multiple launch points. The river stage also has quite a lot of power-ups and bonuses that put you in some risky areas, like under a windmill. But who can resist the allure of flying under a windmill? The cups are purely just racking up points. You don't fail no matter what. It ties in with the game's more laid-back vibe. Just don't worry, get points or don't, who cares? I've gone through several cups, and yeah, there's certainly some level recycling. There's also not a whole lot of variety in objectives either. You have the typical reach the target stages, and others where you just fly around getting points until the timer hits 0. Monkey Ball obviously takes the you're in a ball idea to its absolute limit, and maybe it's unfair to expect this small indie game to do so as well. But even if you stick to Monkey Target, I think there's definitely a lot you could do with the idea beyond the more straightforward tasks. If you're playing this game solo, you might get bored after a few cups unless you are really a score hound and need to max out everything. Fortunately, the game does have a multiplayer mode, and that's where both this and Monkey Target shine after all. Bonito Days is probably easier to get into since the controls are simplified. I played both this and Monkey Target with my wife, and she definitely was able to quickly succeed with Bonito Days faster than, say, Super Monkey Ball. It's yet another easy pick-up-and-play multiplayer Switch game. We always look at the N64 as the golden age of local multiplayer, but Switch certainly surpasses it in the sheer number of couch co-op games. Kids that grew up with the Switch are definitely going to reminisce about playing 4-player games together when they get older. As far as Monkey Target clones go, Bonito Days is pretty solid. You can probably get a few hours out of it from the single-player mode, or if you've got a group together, it's a fun party game. I probably got it on sale for something like $3, so it's definitely worth that. I feel bad about buying indie games on sale though, because hey, they worked hard and need the money, way more than big publishers, but once a game goes on sale, it's hard to go back, right? Money's money though, so I guess you gotta take what you can get. I'm not much of a phone gamer. I think my peak was probably the early 2010s when I got my first smartphone and was amazed at how powerful it was. Every now and then some game will come out of nowhere and grab me though, and this time that game is Marvel Snap. It was developed by Second Dinner, who is most notable for being founded by Ben Brode, the former game director of Hearthstone. That's another game I got really into and probably spent more than I should have. And like that game, Marvel Snap is another collectible card game, but instead of Warcraft characters I don't know, it's filled with Marvel characters I mostly know. Gotta admit, I had no idea who Khazar was, but I do know of the Savage Land, so that's something. I consider myself a card game fan, but I don't actively play any of the existing physical or digital ones. I'm more into card games structured like a video game. So things like Card Fighters Clash or mini games like Gwent and Triple Triad are up my alley. I don't need to keep paying for better cards, and I still get the fun of customization and deck building. I do casually collect Pokemon cards though because, well, there are Pokemon on them. But the nature of card games is both A, gambling, and B, keeping a flow of consistent new cards in order to keep older cards at a disadvantage so you buy newer ones. That's fine if it's your only hobby, but for me, I just want to sit down and make a deck and have a good time. So far, Marvel Snap is scratching that itch. It's a TCG, but there's no booster packs or pre-made decks to buy. Instead, you get cards in a somewhat linear fashion by leveling up. It's a free-to-play game, so yeah, there are some confusing currencies, and you're sometimes wondering what buys what and where the XP goes. Fortunately, the game just started, so it's not wildly complex yet. The main currency is credits. Of course, there's gold that translates more closely to real cash. You spend your credits on boosting card rarity, which then boosts your collection level, which unlocks new cards, more credits, and chances to boost more cards, so the cycle can repeat all over again. There's also a battle pass that is your typical this is free, this is not tiered system. Saying it out loud, it seems complicated, but it's not once you start playing. Things just kind of level up all at the same time, and you're often being prompted to upgrade your cards to get new cards, so as long as you keep playing, you'll keep earning. Thus far, I think it's a pretty fair, free, player-friendly way to dole out stuff in the game. The most important aspect are the cards, and if you just grind enough, you'll eventually get almost every card. Boosting card rarity does require credits, and I'm sure as you rank up more, it becomes more expensive, so you will probably be at the mercy of dailies to keep getting new cards, but I haven't crashed into the dreaded free-to-play wall just yet. The game mostly makes its money through cosmetics, like new card designs and the Battle Pass, which does give some exclusive new cards. There's certainly been a major shift these past few years in having a more cosmetic-focused free-to-play system due to the huge success of games like Fortnite. I've always wanted a free-to-play card game that just gave you all the cards and then made its money through cosmetics, but I never thought that would happen since the old booster pack, aka loot box system, is so ingrained in the world of collectible card games. Marvel Snap is at least the closest to what I've always wanted. You might think, well, won't everyone have the same cards in deck if everyone is on the same linear progression? Not really. I have about 60 cards, and even within that, I can make diverse decks to suit different roles, and include characters with unique synergies. You do see other people using the same cards for sure, but I don't think I've encountered anyone with my exact same deck, and the nature of the game allows a lot of dynamism within a battle. Sorry, I've talked for a few minutes without mentioning the actual game mechanics, But when it comes to both free-to-play games and card games, you kind of want to lead with, how long can I play this before the game expects me to fork over cash just to keep having fun? Now that I've explained that the free-to-play system is fair, at least for now, let's dig into what makes this game so fun. For one, I really appreciated the small deck size. It's kind of funny how we just keep getting smaller and smaller with decks. Magic and Pokemon have 60 cards. Card Fighters Clash took it down to 50. Hearthstone came around and said, nah, let's do 30 cards. Gwent is more flexible, but most decks have around 20 cards. Table Turf Battle and Splatoon 3 went even leaner with 15 cards. Marvel Snap, 12 card decks, baby. Is the ultimate TCG just going to turn into high card draw? We're getting scarily close. The small deck size certainly helps newcomers. The Pokemon card game is actually a lot of fun to play, but unless you start reading guides, you're not going to have any idea on how many Pokemon, trainer cards, and energy cards you need. In Marvel Snap, you can really learn just by playing. The field has 3 locations, each with its own unique effect. The goal of the game is to have the most points in 2 of the 3 locations. It's a bit similar to Artifact's lanes and Gwent's multiple rows in a way, since you're not only thinking about what card to play, but where to place it. The location effects make each game feel totally new and dynamic. They're so vastly different from each other, and it's really fun to just take advantage of. There's Central Park, which spawns squirrels in other areas. Another gives you 100 points if you have the most cards at that location. Some might clone your cards, give you bonus energy if you don't have any cards there, or allow special abilities to activate twice. You don't win solely by what cards you play, but in how you utilize each location. Games last 6 turns, and each locations are revealed on turns 1 to 3, so you might completely mix up your strategy halfway through each match. Your MVP for a game can change wildly depending on what locations you come across. This element of randomness really does help players understand the merit of their deck. Obviously, winning isn't random at all, and racking up victories relies more on knowing your deck's advantages than just trying to one-up your enemy. You aren't winning your matches the same way every time. In a lot of card games, decks are built to do one specific thing, and if you don't pull that off or you're countered, well, there's no way to win. But since winning here is tied in with how you use locations and where you place your cards, there's definitely a lot of flexibility in terms of what strategies you use each match. Games only last about 3 to 5 minutes, which is great for your free time until you realize that you can't simply stop after one match. It's very quick, very fast-paced, and win or lose, you always get at least something. There are so many bars filling up in the background that stuff is just popping off all the time. Is this secretly damaging your brain chemistry? Maybe, but I got a new card and that's what's most important. Ironically, the game doesn't really take a whole lot of inspiration from Marvel in terms of gameplay mechanics. Yes, all the cards are Marvel characters and locations are places in the Marvel universe, but you could honestly just slap any skin on this. It could be Star Wars Snap or Minion Snap. I suppose you could say this about any licensed game, but it does really feel that the whole Marvel thing is just an aesthetic choice. Sometimes cards do have power similar to their Marvel counterparts, like Scarlet Witch can change the location, aka warp reality, but others do just whatever. Hawkeye gives a boost to a card played after him in the same location. Is that what Hawkeye typically does? Make someone who shows up later than him slightly more powerful? The plus side is that you don't need to know about Marvel to like this game because the mechanics are so strong. If you've never picked up a comic or watched a MCU film in your life, you can still be hooked by this game. I'm a Marvel fan, so it's cool to use Ant-Man and Captain America in a deck, but if I had a completely different skin, I'd still be into it. Another interesting thing to note is that each character is a card with its own logo on the bottom. So theoretically, it would be pretty confusing to introduce a new card with the same character, especially since cards have alternate art and cosmetics that you can unlock. So is there just never going to be another Captain America card? Or will they call it Captain America DX or something? I know the Pokemon TCG has the same Pokemon multiple times with the same name, but the card art is different, so you are never confused about what it is when you first see it. But for now, no matter what art Captain America has, you know it's always going to have the same power. A side tangent, but I wonder how they're going to address this in the future. People sometimes ask me, is Marvel popular in Japan? I'd say yes, but not nearly as popular as it is in the States, and it's definitely below manga in the comics tier list. I'd say most Shonen Jump properties are way more popular than the MCU, but at least in Tokyo, there are still quite a few Marvel pop-up shops, exhibits, and the movies are pretty successful. I see people walking around in Marvel gear all the time, so the fan base is here. I have been seeing a lot of Japanese ads for Marvel Snap on Twitter, so there might be a big push for that game over here if it builds momentum. The Japanese mobile gaming sphere can be pretty unpredictable at times. Dragon Quest Rivals debuted in 2017 and was a huge hit at launch. I think it had something absurd like the most downloads ever for a game in Japan at launch. What about now? Well, it was discontinued last year. The mobile gaming space is very, very fickle. Maybe in a year Marvel Snap will be deactivated, but for now it's certainly worth trying out. That's it for games. Now for the feature on Surugaya. Any retro game fan or collector is truly spoiled if they live in Tokyo. I really have to wonder if there's a single game that's not within the borders of Tokyo-to. Maybe some super obscure title where only one copy exists and it's in some private collector's home. But for most titles, you can probably just find it by walking the streets of Tokyo and popping into the hundreds of used goods and recycle shops. On this very podcast, I've talked about quite a few. The iconic Hard Off, the legendary Super Potato, the obscure Dorama, and so on. But out of all the retro shops and chains, I would have to say that Surugaya is maybe my favorite. In terms of quality and price, the big locations around Tokyo are pretty hard to beat, and it feels like a one-stop shop for retro games and merch in general. Surugaya was created by A2, who originally operated bookstores. The name Surugaya comes from the HQ of A2, Suruga City in Shizuoka. The name reminds me of Yamashiroya, the famous Tokyo toy shop, in that they both have sort of a traditional old-sounding name, but sell a lot of items geared towards younger audiences. It originally launched in 1998 as an online shopping store and opened up its first physical location in Osaka in 2015, with the Akihabara locations opening up in 2016. It has a very distinctive blue sign with its kanji logo in white. Now there are a few dozen locations throughout Japan. Sadly, I haven't been to all of them, but I want to highlight at least a few of my favorites in the Tokyo area. Unlike something like Super Potato, Surugaya is not game exclusive. In fact, it's probably more well known for its used anime goods. Looking for a figure at a low price or some sort of out-of-print Gundam model? Surugaya is probably the first place you should check. Toys, CDs, board games, books, any kind of physical media that has ever been released in Japan eventually ended up here. It's not too dissimilar from Book Off on paper, but it leans way more into toys and CDs over books. And when it comes to games, it definitely trounces most Book Offs. The main reason why I like Surugaya is that it strikes a good balance between stock and price. Something like Super Potato might have way more games, but at inflated prices. Hard Off almost always has the best bang for your buck, or best bang for your yen, but the selection is really random. Surugaya has a bigger selection than most Hard Offs, and a much lower sticker price than Super Potato. Plus they carry a lot of game-related merch, so if you want to pick up that as well, you can find it here. It's not the most comprehensive, but you'll be hard-pressed not to find something that catches your eye. Like I mentioned earlier, there are dozens of shops in Japan, but I want to highlight just 3. The first one is the Surugaya in Shinjuku Marui Annex. It's a small but trendy department store that's aimed mostly towards younger people. The huge glass windows let you clearly see a myriad of shops on the first floor. While it's not too far from Shinjuku Station, it might be easy to miss unless you're specifically looking for it. On the first floor is the official Godzilla merch shop, so I imagine a lot of people check that out and then are drawn into the siren call of Surugaya. The Marui Annex has a number of interesting shops and a lot of pop-up exhibitions and stores, so it's a fun place to check out every now and then. The 5th floor is solely dedicated to Surugaya. The game area is on the left of the escalator, so you can make a beeline there if you're not interested in the rest. Like most retro game shops, aisles are broken up by hardware, so you've got your Super Famicom section, your Mega Drive section, etc. The labeling is pretty clear and easy to navigate. Although it's located in a pretty touristy area, I think the prices at the Shinjuku store aren't bad, though to be honest, I do think they have been going up these past few years. Pokemon games especially. I want to say maybe 5 years ago, I could find Gold and Silver in box for maybe 1,100 yen. Now it's at least 3,000, and I've seen Game Boy titles reach 5,000. It's nuts. Put these out on the Switch, please. When I got my Analog Pocket earlier this year, the Shinjuku Surugaya was my first stop. I picked up Sakura Wars GB and Tetris DX for under 1,000 yen each, and WarioWare for GBA was about 1,600 yen. All in box, complete with instruction manuals. WarioWare still had these stickers in the instruction booklet. I remember using those ASAP back in the day. The bottom part of my GameCube controller had a big Wario sticker, so I commend the original owner for holding back. Though aren't stickers supposed to be used? They look a bit lonely just on the sheet. Anyways, for about $30, I managed to pick up 3 games in box in great condition. The Game Boy section in particular is quite good at the Shinjuku store. Game Boy especially can be really hit and miss in places like Book Off and Hard Off, where they might just be lucky to have a few loose carts. I guess since Game Boy was being targeted at an even younger audience, and since it was portable, that led to a lot of boxes being destroyed or tossed out, so I'm always in awe when I see dozens of Game Boy titles just sitting on the shelf in pristine condition. I've even seen Pocket Love here bundled with the CD. The Nintendo section in the Shinjuku shop is as meaty as you'd expect, though of course the N64 area is always woefully small. But last time I visited, they had 2 N64s in box, including a gold one, so there's always something cool here. I have seen Virtual Boy titles here as well, again, in box, just waiting for you to blind yourself. Other fun stuff, Police Knots, various Sakura Wars, special editions, PSO with the modem adapter, Crystal Chronicles bundled with the link cables. There's so many wonderful items just sitting on the shelves. If you wander into the other sections, you'll probably find other game-related items, like Pokemon plushies, Mario board games from the 80s, and I even saw the Street Fighter II anime, manga, and DVD bundle that is actually a semi-sequel to the Street Fighter II anime movie. Yeah, you could just look it up on YouTube, but wouldn't it be more fun to actually own it? Staying in Tokyo, Surugaya also has a notable presence in Akihabara. Instead of having just one shop, there are actually many different Surugaya stores spread out all over the main area in Sotokanda. There's a Surugaya for figures, a Surugaya for CDs, a Surugaya for board games. Pretty much every nerdy hobby has some sort of offshoot store here. And of course, a Surugaya solely dedicated to games. It's off the main shopping street, but it's still very accessible by walking from Akihabara Station. And an added bonus is that it's right next to the retro computer shop Beep, which I also talked about on this podcast. Thankfully, this one small section of Akihabara managed to give me 2 episodes worth of content. The Akihabara Surugaya Games shop is truly excellent, with a massive stock of both software and hardware, featuring some of the best prices in the area. A word of warning though, it is wildly cramped. I would still give Beep the award for most cramped shop I've been to in Japan, but this is a close second. If someone is in an aisle, well, you have to go around or you're stuck there forever. People will try to rescue you, but they can't because it's too narrow to even spot you. You have to be very economic in your movement, and unlike the Shinjuku stop, the rows are not clearly laid out, plus a lot of goodies are hidden on the walls, so you need to be more eagle-eyed than normal. I honestly can't say if it has more games than the Shinjuku store. It's far more compact, but no inch is spared here. I will note that the Akihabara branch certainly has more rare oddities. Hidden behind glass is a near collection of Nintendo 64 disk drive games, including Mario Artist, for about 20,000 yen. Every time I come here, I always see Mario Paint or Mario and Wario bundled with the mouse. Not sure if it's the same copy or they just want to keep that stocked up. A lot of the games are put in plastic cases together. Like 2 Famicom games will be in one case. A lot of Game Boy and GBA titles are also like this. Not sure the reasoning, I guess to prevent damage since it's so cramped and people might be bumping into them, but there's no rhyme or reason in terms of what games they bundle together. I saw Kirby's Adventure and Megami Tensei in the same case. Kirby is not that scary. This results in the GBA games being a bit hard to spot on the shelves since you really only see the side of them. Unless you've memorized the box color, there's a lot of pulling things off of shelves just to see what it is. Outside of the usual suspects, this Surugaya also has a lot of retro Japanese PC games. Beep is literally right next door, so it's not that special. One thing that did impress me was a small shelf of Sega Pico games. The Pico was an edutainment computer/toy with software that you could insert into the device. Sonic had its own game, and believe it or not, there were several Pokemon titles as well. These are not your typical games per se, more like mini games where you solve math problems or learn hiragana. But Pikachu is on the box along with the Sega logo, so it's a very strange thing to see. Sadly, I didn't see any of the Pokemon games when I last visited, but they might pop up eventually. The shop also carries Intellivision titles and the handheld Pac-Man game from 1981, so you can play some version of Pac-Man on it for the low price of 17,000 yen. These are the type of things that you can just find tucked in the corner, so if you visit, be sure to examine everything carefully. Even though it's in Akihabara, the prices are easily among the best in the area. If you find it here at a good price, don't feel like you need to shop hop in order to get a better deal, because I doubt you will. The final Surugaya shop I wanted to chat about is not in Tokyo at all, but in Yokohama. I found this purely by accident on my last visit to the city. I was heading home and wondered if there was anything game-related I should check on the way back. I noticed that both a Pokemon Center and Surugaya were in the same building, so hey, I had to check that out. It's located in Marui City, Yokohama, very close to Yokohama Station. Surugaya is on the 7th floor, with the Pokemon Center housed on the 8th. I talked up how good the stock in the Shinjuku and Akihabara branches were, but honestly, the Yokohama branch blows both of them out of the water in terms of the sheer number of games they carry. I honestly couldn't believe it, just rows and rows of games with huge Nintendo sections. There are a lot of duplicates, such as literally a dozen copies of Mario Golf 64, but even beyond that, the shop is home to thousands of games. The Super Famicom section in particular is overwhelmingly huge. There's an entire block just for box games, and another for carts. For non-Nintendo stuff, there's a decent-sized section for other games. Mega Drive, CD, MSX, even Neo Geo has their own section. Lunar is about 3,000 yen. Not sure if that's good or bad, but honestly, I don't think I've ever bumped into Lunar until I came here. I haven't really talked up a lot about PlayStation games, but yeah, all three stores have a very large section of PS1, 2, 3, P, Vita, etc. At the Yokohama store, I saw a cart literally overflowing with PS1 games. And if you're into handhelds, WonderSwan, Game Gear, and Neo Geo Pocket are all represented way more than in most game shops, even in Akihabara. I'm not sure if I can say that the Yokohama store is definitively the greatest retro game shop of all time, but it is surprisingly robust and not something I hear a lot of people talk about. Oh, and the Yokohama Surugaya is maybe the best place to buy Pokemon plushies. The shop carries hundreds of them, and they're amusingly color-coded. All the green Pokemon are in one shelf, the orange ones are in another. It's easy to pick out who you want and where they are. Of course, there's also a gigantic Pikachu section for everyone's favorite mascot. The Pokemon Center is literally a floor up, so I do kind of wonder if they're just sending their surplus stock to Surugaya to resell. There's gotta be some connection. No way it's just a coincidence. A bit outside of the topic, but the Yokohama Pokemon Center is quite nice and has a cool Kyogre statue, and Pikachu wears a little sailor outfit, so check it out. Surugaya feels like a mix of all the good elements from other retro shops. Good stock, good prices, fun weird things to look at and not buy, and any of the branches I've talked about today are absolutely worth visiting if you're in Tokyo or Yokohama. If you go to Akihabara and get overwhelmed by all the shops, I would honestly just say hit up Surugaya first and clean up there. It might not have everything you want, but I bet it has something, and maybe stuff you didn't even think about until you saw it. The great thing about all these locations is that they're in populous areas and other fun points of interest are nearby, so don't feel like you need to go too far out of your way to pick up some retro games. That's it for the feature. Now let's look at the news. Recently, I haven't really been talking about Japanese sales data. The reason? Honestly, I've just forgotten. But there's been more than a few interesting sales-related news items these past few weeks. The biggest story for the past few months has obviously been Splatoon 3. It had the biggest opening weekend for a game in Japanese history and continues to top the charts weeks later. It's had over 3 million physical units in Japan with no signs of stopping. Nintendo's latest quarterly sales report will be out in a few days, detailing the sales data from July 1st to September 30th. I suspect Splatoon 3 will be fairly close to the 10 million mark. Splatoon 2 sold 12 million after 5 years, and Splatoon 3 is going to easily trounce that number. The game is a huge success and a legit cultural phenomenon in Japan. It's truly incredible how Nintendo managed to create an IP that not only stacks up with the biggest franchises, but surpasses most of them. I'm still playing a ton of Splatoon 3, and I'm looking forward to whatever update they have. The single-player DLC will probably be next fall, but even something like new stages and weapons will be enough to keep people playing. And I'm really excited for the upcoming Pokemon Splatfest and hope we see the fabled Big Run before the year is up. Persona 5 also finally debuted on the Switch with 50k physical units the first week, fairly in line with expectations. With sales and the lack of Persona 6 anytime soon, I think this game will have a long tail on it. Maybe a little too late for some, but Atlus is really pushing Royal hard in advertising both in Japan and in the West. One big surprise has been the reception to Dragon Quest X Offline Edition. This is the single-player remake, I guess, of the Dragon Quest X MMO. It's not a project with a massive budget, In fact, it looks more similar to a 3DS game than anything. But so far, it sold 200k physical units in Japan, and there was even a stock shortage for a few weeks after its release. I don't know what the expectations were for this game, but no matter how the industry changes, Dragon Quest is still a name with value. I'm curious how Dragon Quest Treasures performs this December. The game looks interesting, but there hasn't been a big marketing push for it yet, and it seems a little lost between all the other Square titles coming out in the next few months. Pokemon TCG announced that the final set of the Sword and Shield generation, VStar Universe, is coming this December. It's mostly reprints of past cards, but it does have some alternate art. Think of it as a greatest hits collection for the Gen 8 cards. I haven't bought boosters in a while, but I might pick up a few here just to flesh out my collection. We're still a few months away from the Gen 9 cards that will be more expensive, but it will be kind of nice to start all over again. My Pokemon card organization skills are terrible, so a hard reset is much needed. New generation, new cards, new folder. Big new games are coming out, but also some are being announced. Shinonome, an Edo-period roguelike game, is coming to Steam on November 11th in early access. It's from Wodan, who was established by Parasite Eve and Resident Evil writer Kenichi Iwao and Capcom character designer Tatsuya Yoshikawa. The premise is that you are in a haunted house and navigate rooms by defeating monsters and solving puzzles. It doesn't seem to be heavily action-focused, though, as you defeat monsters by luring them into traps and using your wits. I'm very iffy when it comes to roguelike games, but the art looks wonderful and the setting already hooked me, so I'll keep an eye on it. We've got a haunted house game, but what about a haunted spaceship game? Sound interesting? Well, too bad if you're in Japan, because the Callisto Protocol has been cancelled here. Due to Japan's strict censorship rules when it comes to extreme violence, namely decapitations, the game's developers did not want to create an alternate version for Japanese audiences, and thus it won't be released over here. This isn't exactly unprecedented. The first Dead Space game also didn't release in Japan. It's a bit odd to imagine that Japan's censorship laws are so strict for video games, especially considering its long history of graphic violence in movies, and just general questionable subjects and imagery, but for whatever reason, visceral on-screen video game violence is a big no-no. Anytime I buy a Western M-rated game, I definitely buy it on my US account, because who knows what was changed in the Japanese version. One game that is coming out in Japan, though, is Front Mission First Remake on November 30th. This is, I think you can guess, a remake of Front Mission 1 for Super Famicom. I originally assumed Front Mission 1 never came out in the West, but it actually did. The Super Famicom game was ported to PlayStation, and then the PlayStation version was ported to DS, and that version hit Western shores. It's being handled by Forever Entertainment and Megapixel Studio, who worked on the Panzer Dragoon and House of the Dead remake. Square is seemingly completely hands-off, which is a bit surprising. I've never played a Front Mission game, so why not start here? I do love tiles and attacking in turns. If you are really hardcore into Japanese SRPGs, you are feasting these next few months with Tactics Ogre, Front Mission, and Fire Emblem all coming out in a 90-day span. And some sad news, game artist, director, and producer Rieko Kodama has unfortunately passed away. A tribute to her was discovered in the recent Mega Drive Mini 2 released in Japan a few days ago. You might not know her name off the top of your head, but she was one of the most prominent women in the Japanese gaming industry. She left her mark on many of Sega's classic games. She did art for Sonic, Alex Kidd, Fantasy Zone, Altered Beast, and also directed notable games like Phantasy Star 4 and Magic Knight Rayearth on the Saturn. She was also the lead producer of Skies of Arcadia, one of my personal favorite JRPGs. So if you have some time, feel free to read up on her legacy. It's definitely very important. Now for the Japanese gaming phrase of the week. I've got a dual one this time, koashi or kopan. Both refer to the same thing, a light kick, typically while crouching in a fighting game. These don't do a lot of damage, but could help set up bigger moves, or if you're desperately trying to get rid of that sliver of health your opponent still has, you might just spam these attacks in desperation. Has anyone actually done this in real life? I don't think I've ever seen somebody do a crouch kick, but it's such an integral part of fighting games. Anyways, don't forget, koashi, which means small foot, or kopan, which means small bread. I'm not sure why pan is here, write in if you know. And the Japanese tweet of the week. I picked one from Ezume_90. It's stylish fan art of For the Frog the Bell Tolls. It keeps the art style of the original game, but gives it a more detailed modern update. This year is the 30th anniversary of the game, so it's cool to see so many people share their fan art and memory of this Japan-only title. Also, if you haven't heard it yet, I did cover the game on a past episode, so check it out. As always, the tweet is in the podcast description. That's all this time. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well. It helps with visibility. The podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. If there's anything you want me to talk about or cover, don't be shy, just message me on Twitter. The next episode will be on Sunday, November 20th. There may be a Pokemon or two discussed. See you next time. Matane.